Hi, my name is Rick Noel, and welcome to the fourth segment of my video series on Artemis, which is a photo application that I wrote that helps you find photos very quickly on your computer. And in today's segment, we're going to talk about albums and the basics of the slideshow functionality. And I'm going to dive right into the live demo. First, I'll share my screen. And okay, so for those of you who have seen a previous version of these videos, you are familiar now with the Artemis UI. You've got your results panel here where the matching photos for your search criteria that you enter in the search bar are shown. And on the right-hand side is the albums panel here. Now, if I, first thing I want to do is create a new album. Now, let's say, for example, a friend calls me up and says, I'm visiting Arches National Park in Utah. I know you've been there many times and have many photographs. I'd like to see some of them so I can see what's in store for us. And so I can tell my friend, sure, just give me a little bit of time here to pull something together. So to do that, I can bring up Artemis. First thing I can do is create an album that will hold the photos I want to show this person. So I bring up the context menu from the albums panel and choose create new album. That prompts me for the album name, and since I'm creating an album of photos from Arches National Park, I'll call it Arches. Now, the way that the albums UI works is that the albums that are listed here are the ones that a photo that I select on the left-hand side are members of. And so right now I don't have any photos selected, so it's not showing me any albums they belong to, but we'll get to that in a moment. What I'm going to do, similar to the tags panel, is it has a command to say, don't filter the albums. And what that'll do is it'll show all the albums that Artemis knows about, regardless of what the selection is. So we're going to put it in that non-filter mode so I have access to my albums to work with here. So I've created my Arches album. The next thing I need to do is to pull up some photos of Arches. Now, I've named my Arches photos with Arches in the name and also set location information. So I can simply type in Arches in my search bar to get all the photographs that I've taken at Arches. And now what I can do is select a bunch of photographs that I want to add to the Arches album. And I can select the album in the albums panel and choose add photos to album. And just that easily, I've added 11 photos to my Arches album. Now I can see the contents of an album by bringing up the context menu and choosing show photos in album. So that now shows just the photos that exist in that album. Another way of showing the contents of an album is to simply double click on the album name. So I can, for example, double click on the 2021 calendar photos and I get all the photos in that album. So I'll double click on Arches to bring my Arches photos back. And so now I've got my photos here, but what I would like to do is order the photos in the order in which somebody would see these photos as they drive up to and through the park. So to do that, I can select my Arches album, bring up the context menu and choose reorder photos and album. And when I bring that up, I get this dialog box that contains the thumbnails and file names of all the photos in the album. And to reorder the photos, I simply click and drag the thumbnails to the position I want them in. So for example, if they're going to be driving from, say, Denver towards Arches, they're going to see the canyon here on Route 128 leading to the park first. So I want to move this to the first position, and I can do that by clicking the left mouse button down and dragging, and you'll see that the cursor has changed to an arrow with a thumbnail indicator, indicate I'm in the drag mode to reorder the photo. And you'll also notice if I drag this cursor between photos, you'll see that a blue insertion bar is added to indicate where that photo is going to be placed when I release the mouse button. So I'm going to make this the first photo in the list. Then next they're going to see Fisher Towers on 128, and I'll leave that where it is. I've got one more picture here of Fisher Towers, so I'll move that next. Then they will see Castle Valley, this picture here, so we'll put that next. Then they'll arrive at the park, so I'll move the picture of the park sign there at the entrance. Then they'll see the Gossips and Sheep Rock next, so I'll put that in. Then they'll see Balanced Rock. Then they'll see the window section, and finally Delicate Arch they'll see at the end. So I've got the order I want, I hit OK. And now if I double click on Arches to redisplay the contents of the album, you'll see that it's ordered in the order in which I established in the dialog. So just like that, I'm ready to show my photos of Arches to my friend. So I can reconnect with them, set up my Zoom meeting to show them the contents of my album, Arches album, but showing them the thumbnails in this view is not particularly interesting. So I can select the album I want to show them and bring up the contents menu and choose slideshow. And that will bring up a slideshow of the photos of in the album. And you'll notice the slideshow has a nice large picture of the photo I'm looking at. It has a film strip at the bottom of the rest of the photos that are in the slideshow. And in the middle here, they have the set of controls you would expect to see when you were playing a slideshow. This middle one here is the pause play one. So if I click that, it'll show the photo, each photo for 3 seconds automatically. I'll hit the pause to stop that momentarily. You can also use this left arrow icon to manually show the previous photograph and the right arrow one to manually show the next photograph. You can jump to the beginning of the slideshow using this first icon and jump to the end using this last icon, and that's it. You can also jump to an arbitrary photograph in the slideshow by simply clicking on that photograph in the film strip area here. There are also keys that you can, keyboard keys that you can use to control the slideshow. You can use the left arrow to go back manually, use the right arrow to go forward manually. You can hit the space bar to toggle the play, automatic play and pause functionality. And lastly, you can hit escape to exit the slideshow. Now, you'll notice there are additional controls on each side of these play controls, and I will talk about those in a subsequent video when I talk more about additional functionality within Artemis. So I'm going to hit the stop icon here, which will exit the slideshow. Now there's some additional functionality available in the album's context menu. One of the things you can do is rename the album, and that just prompts you for a new name, and whatever new name you give it. Let's say I took these in 2020 and I want to change my album name to reflect that. I simply do that and I rename the album. You can delete the album, which I'll do momentarily, and that will delete the album itself, but doesn't delete the photos in the album. Next, you can zip up the contents of an album so that you can share those photos of that album with somebody else. And that just essentially prompts you for the name of a zip file, and you can use the button here to bring up the Explorer to find an existing file. And at the bottom here is a set of controls that allow you to, if you wish, clear various privacy fields of the photographs before you share them. So you may want to clear the artist field if you don't want somebody to know who took the photograph. If the photo has location information, let's say you're sharing photographs of your house and you don't want somebody to know the exact location, you can clear the GPS data from the photos. And lastly, you can clear the tags if there are any tag values that you might find to be private and don't want to share. You can check any of these checkboxes selectively to clear specific fields, or you can check this select all, select none to toggle all on another one. And then when you hit OK, it generates a zip file that you can then put in your favorite file sharing app like Google Drive or Dropbox and share a link to it to your friends. Next is the filtering of albums. And as we talked about earlier, right now I'm not filtering albums. If I turn this on, then when I have nothing selected, then the albums panel is blank. And if I select a photo, it will then show me which albums that photo belongs to. So that is the basics of albums. The next thing I want to do is talk about the second way in which you can create albums. This first way was an album-centric way. I created the album first, then I selected my photographs, and then came here and said, add them to the photo album. So I'm going to delete this album and recreate it. And I'm going to do that by doing it in a photo-centric way. So instead of creating the album first, I'm going to get my photos first that I want to add to the album. And what I'll do is I'll select a bunch of photos I want to add to the album. And then I can right-click and say add to album. And since I don't have my Arches album created yet, I simply click on the new album button to create the Arches album here. And now I've got it selected here, so I hit OK. And now I've added my photos to the Arches album. And I can add additional ones after the fact by simply coming down and selecting some more photos that I want to add to the album. And I can right-click and say add to album. And then I just pick my Arches album to add them to and hit OK. And you see it added 2 more photos to the Arches album. Another way to add photos to the album is to select the photos that you want to add. And you can click and drag the selection to the album you want to add them to, and then release the mouse button. And that, as you see, added these 2 photos to my album. So now if I go to the Arches album and double click on it to get its contents, you'll see that it has the original 11 albums plus a couple of albums that I added with the context menu, and the last 2 were added from the drag and drop functionality. So that's the basics of albums and slideshow. Hopefully you found this a useful mechanism to categorize your photographs. If you want to learn more about Artemis, the additional functionality that it has, and all about its search capabilities, you can visit my website specified here. And on that page, you'll see the details of Artemis and the complete list of the videos on Artemis that I've done. And thank you for watching.